you're a returning user this year, the very first thing you need to do in order to be set up for the 2021 season is to go ahead and finalize your 2020 campaign. We need to make sure that we kind of wipe the slate clean. So I'm going to show you how to do that really quickly. If I come here under the admin screen, I'm going to go to campaign. This is where we'll spend most of our time today, on the campaign admin screens. All the way over to the right, there is an option that says Finalize Campaign. When we say finalize, and we kind of try to put it here in red text to make sure that you know this, but quick tip, because this is a trap a couple of people have fallen into, finalizing your campaign means you're closing it from the previous year. So we're closing our campaign. So you only want to do this one time at the very end of your campaign. Okay, this is not something you want to do for this year's campaign until probably after Christmas or beyond. So if you haven't finalized your campaign from 2020, that's the first step we need to take. So I'm going to come here, and this is giving us a helpful reminder of what will and will not be available from my 2020 campaign once I finalize this. Rest assured that all of your data from last year will still be accessible under the reports section. So you'll still be able to pull lists of all your applicants, angels, sponsors, all these kinds of things from last season. You'll be able to do that under the report section. This just means that we're resetting the campaign so that all of our, first of all of our campaign settings will be applicable for this upcoming year. And then we are basically starting with a fresh slate of applications coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and click down at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and click Finalize. It's saying, are you sure you want to do this? This is going to permanently close your campaign. So you want to make sure that you're really ready to do this. If by some mistake you accidentally do close this and you need it to be reopened, we can help with that on the back end. So you would just need to send in a ticket to TSAM support, and I'll give all of that information on how to reach us at the end. But if you do it by accident, don't panic, we can always get it back, but you want to make sure that you are really ready to finalize this, which you should only do one time at the very end of your campaign. So after Christmas, don't even look at finalize until after Christmas. So let's finalize our 2020 campaign. And then the next thing we need to do is relaunch our new campaign. So the way this is set up is going to be a little bit different depending on which territory you're in. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time going over that because if you're in the Western Territory, for example, this would already be set up for you. If you are in the Central or Eastern Territory, we have a process where you come through us to get your campaign set up. If you need more information on that, feel free to reach out to us. If you're in the Southern Territory, there's a little bit more of a self-service model, but as this message is showing us, you do need to be the officer or area commander or someone in charge at that location in order to be able to complete the re-registration, just so we make sure that that's something that your commanding officers are well aware of. So this is what that activation screen looks like. But again, I won't spend a ton of time going through this because this is a little different for each territory. But I'm going to go ahead and activate this campaign. We're going to say we're going to purchase the gold package. The pricing, if you have questions on pricing, we're happy to help with those. I can give a very basic overview of that. What it really comes down to is the number of angels that you process per year really directly affects the pricing. And then, of course, how many angels you have under your, or excuse me, not angels, how many reporting locations you have under your command. So this is DFW. So because DFW is a very large area command with 20 plus reporting units underneath it, it will be a different pricing structure than if it's just a single core. The single basic price for a standalone core that processes under 5,000 angels is just under $500, if that gives you a little bit of an idea. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this out. And this is just information that helps us be able to contact you for billing purposes later. I'll just go ahead and fake some stuff here. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead. If you are not aware, the whatever the pricing works out to for your specific location, and again, that's going to differ based on your setup. But we don't bill for that until January of the following year. So kind of after that Christmas rush comes in and you're a little more settled, we'll be able to bill you for that on the back end in January, and give you a little bit of time to pay that then. So this has actually created my campaign order, and now I'm going to go ahead and move into setting up my next campaign. So a new feature this year, which I know a lot of you will be really pleased about, and some of you may have already seen, is the ability to copy your campaign settings or import your campaign settings from a previous year. Because the campaign setup kind of is a little cumbersome, there's a lot of detail to put in there. We want to make sure that we're able to bring forward as much of that information as possible. So what I'm seeing here is all of the past campaigns for this location's angel tree. Now, of course, this is our test platform, so I see a lot of past campaigns and a lot of test ones at that. But what you're going to want to do is choose the one that you think has the closest settings to what you're going to need this year. Most likely it's your most recent previous campaign. So I'm going to choose the 2020 campaign that we want to copy forward. What that's going to do is create my 2021 campaign. So you can see here that it has created my 2021 DFW Metroplex Command Angel Tree campaign. And it has brought with it any of the settings that it can, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about which ones it brought forward and which ones it didn't. But brought forward as many of those settings as it can, just to save you a little bit of time. We would highly recommend that if you are a returning user, that you do use that feature, copy forward any of those settings. Remember that just because we copy them forward, you can still edit them. It just gives you an idea and a reminder of how you had it configured last year, and then you can kind of just edit from there rather than having to do it all from scratch. So that's a helpful tool. Now, what we want to do is just go through the individual parts of campaign setup just to give you some tips and make sure that you know what you're supposed to be configuring on each of these steps. Again, this is the very beginning. This is me setting up this campaign. This is me putting in all of the information that will help the system know how you are trying to run your campaign and set all the rules around it. Just because I'm doing this all now at once doesn't mean that you have to. So if you're not sure yet what your gift cutoff date is going to be, or you're not sure yet what your warehouse address is going to be, there are certain things you can come back and edit this at any time. Okay, as long as you have the admin permissions for your campaign, you're able to come in here and do that at any time. So I'm going to do it all at once and kind of go through it all. But don't worry, you don't have to have all of this information all at once. You can always come back and edit as things change. Even throughout the season, there are certain things that you may need to edit as you go, and you're able to do that. So on the first section here, and I'm just going to kind of fly through all of these different tabs here at the top to give us an idea of what happens in each of these. So the first one, what we call the general setup, really is some of the basic information about your campaign. So the campaign name will default to the current year, 2021, to the name of your unit. So in this case, DFW Metroplex Command, actually now known as NTX, North Texas. But it will default to that, and then you can change that to whatever you want it to be. So a lot of times people will want to say like the 2021 Denton and Collin County program, Angel Tree program, or something like that, something that's more descriptive that your users will understand a little bit better. So you can always edit that. The max angel age, this is a really important one. The max angel age will tell the system, especially if you're using online applications, this is going to be very important. It creates the rule that says angels have to be in this certain age range in order to qualify. So if I say my max angel age is 10, that means as of, and then I say as of this date. So what my configuration here is saying is that my angel must be in order to participate in my program, angels must be 10 years old by that date, by Christmas. So that's what my setup is saying. When someone goes to apply, especially on the online form, when they go to apply and they put in an angel who is 12 years old, it's going to give them a message to say this person doesn't qualify as an angel because they're over the age. Okay, so that's really important because it's going to drive those rules that allow applications to be processed in. Another one is, do you want to allow senior angels? Yes or no. So some locations do. Some locations allow seniors to be part of the Angel Tree program. Some don't. If you don't, that's fine. You just click no. And what that means is all angels are going to have to be 10 years old and under. However, if you do want to allow senior angels, I'll say yes. And then I can say, I want to set a minimum age. So yes, I want to allow seniors, but they need to be at least, let's go with 75. Okay, so when a family goes to apply, especially online, when they go to apply, it's going to be looking to make sure that your angel is between 0 and 10 or 75 plus. So the system's going to use those values to set those rules. So you want to make sure to make sure you've handled that. The gift return date, this is an overall final, absolutely last date that you want to receive gifts back to your warehouse. And so that will show up in a few different places. We'll talk about that more in a later webinar when we're talking about adoptions and gift returns. So we'll deal with that a little bit more in detail then, but just know that that's what that is. And then there are a couple options here for how you want to print your paper angel tags. So these are, again, something we'll cover in one of our upcoming events, actually the next one on August 26th. If you're someone who's going to be using paper angel tree tags in any way, shape, or form, you're going to want to print those out. You're going to want to make sure to attend the next webinar on the 26th. And we'll talk a lot more about the different templates that are available here, where you get the angel tree stock, how they are printed with barcodes, with or not, with names or not, and all the different configurations around that. So we'll kind of skip over that for now, but this is where we'll come back to do that next at the next webinar. So now I'm going to move over to the sites tab. So when we say sites in our Angel Tree program, what we're talking about is any physical location at which you'll be conducting an Angel Tree activity. This can be lots of different things. This could be your distribution sites, so your warehouses, your gyms, wherever you're distributing your gifts from, so where people are going to come pick up their gifts. This could also be where you are doing the intake, where you are accepting applications. This could also be where you are doing adoptions, meaning in-person physical angel tree. Usually these are what we kind of think of as the mall location, or if you have a tree that's inside a Walmart, that kind of thing. Those are your adoption sites. And then similarly, your gift drop-off sites are those places where donors can come drop their gifts. So those may be this one site, one address may perform multiple functions. You may do intake at your core, and you also do distribution at your core, but the adoption sites are somewhere else. So this screen right here is how we configure what sites are included in your campaign, and then from there we define how are we going to use them within this program. So let's start with an example here. I have the Dallas Salvation Army Christmas distribution site. Okay, here's the address that belongs to it. I'm going to go ahead and click on it. This is where I can edit the address. I can actually even down to the pin drop. I can grab this and say, this is our distribution site, but we want people to come in on the west side of the building, and so I can move my map pin there to make sure that they are directed to the exact place. And again, when we start talking about distribution on some of our later webinars, you'll see how this information comes in handy, how it's presented to your applicants, and how they know where exactly to go. They're given maps directly to whatever front door you're trying to direct them to. So once you've set up the address and adjusted the map pin, if you want to do that as well. So that's how I edited an existing site. You can also click Create New Site to create a new one. Close that. So once you have your sites listed here, and I will say for any returning users, a question that I sometimes get is, well, we're not using that site this year anymore. Maybe that was our warehouse last year, but we're not using it. That's fine. If it's listed here under the sites, that's fine. We won't actually use it unless you check one of the use boxes, right? So unless we check one of these boxes that tell us what function it's going to perform for this campaign for this year. So just because you see a site listed there doesn't mean it's necessarily using it until you check one or more of these boxes. So for our Christmas distribution site, this one happens to be both an intake site. So I've checked the intake box there. It happens to be an intake site, and it also happens to be a distribution site. So I've checked the box under distribution. This actually may also be a drop-off site. So if someone wants to drop their gifts off directly at my warehouse, I could check the box to allow them to do that. So any one site can perform multiple functions. What you don't want to do, if at all possible, what you really want to avoid is putting the same site in there multiple times. You don't need to do that. You can put it in once and then associate it with the different functions that it does, okay? One other question that I get kind of often, so I'll go ahead and mention it now, is what if I know I'm going to have a distribution site. It's going to be in a warehouse somewhere, but I don't know the address yet. We don't have a contract for this season yet. I don't know where it's going to be. In order to configure your campaign, we need to have something in there. We need to have a placeholder for that distribution location, that concept of a distribution site. So what I would advise that you do is go ahead and create the new site, call it something like distribution warehouse, and just don't put the address yet. You can put TBD for the address, to be determined at a later date. But we need to go ahead and put it in there so that we can configure all of the settings the system needs to be able to start processing your campaign. So even if you don't have the address, that's fine. You can create the new site with just the title, leave the address blank, or just put in like coming soon or something like that. And you can move forward with your configuration. And then once you have your address, you can always come back, click on that site and add the address in there, okay? My last little tip about that is to make double sure, and I'll mention this again when we get to start talking about processing applications in our next webinar, but just make sure that before you start actually approving applications that you have your address in here. Because once those automatic system notifications start going out to the applicants that have the address, you don't want the address to say TBD as much as possible. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but just know that you can go ahead with configuration. If you don't have your warehouse address yet, you can come back and add that once you have it, okay? All right, so with my sites listed and their associations determined, right? So which intake sites which sites are intake sites, which are adoption sites, which are gift drop-off sites, which are distribution sites, and then any combination of the four. So once I've determined all of that, and that is, I should have said, that is a setting that is brought forward from your previous campaign. So if you have that all configured from last year and you just want to drag that forward, all of those settings will already be there for you, and then you can just pick and choose and edit as necessary. All right, so I am going to now jump to the intake tab, and I'm going to very briefly stop on the intake tab because I want to come back to that. This kind of second part of our webinar today is about intake strategies and how to configure your system for the different strategies that you're trying to achieve with your angel tree intake. So that's going to mostly happen here on the screen. So I'm actually going to come back to this in a moment. The one thing I do want to point out, though, that's kind of apart from your intake strategy is one really important setting is this last column here that says approved distribution sites. So this can kind of be a complicated concept if you are used to only having, one core with one distribution site. But if you have multiples, if you have lots of intake sites and lots of distribution sites all across your area, and you want to make sure that applications that are done at one intake location, make sure that they get distributed at a certain distribution point. So for example, so this is DFW, right? We have multiple intake sites. What I want to say is any intake application that comes through the Dallas Salvation Army Christmas distribution site, the only place they're allowed to pick up their gifts, the only distribution place they're allowed to get an appointment for is the Dallas Salvation Army Christmas distribution. But there may be another situation where I say the distribution center actually also does intake for the Irving Corps for some reason. And we want to be able to assign people appointments to pick up their gifts at the Irving Corps. So I can configure this to say for this intake site, people will be able to pick up their gifts at either this distribution site or the Irving Corps. So that makes a lot more sense when you have a lot of different intake and or distribution sites. That's a way to associate them. And when we get to the intake processing next week, or not next week, the next webinar, you'll be able to see how that plays into it and why that's very important. But that is a required setting. You won't be able to do any intake for this intake site if you don't have an associated distribution site, okay? So that's an important step there. And like I said, I will come back to all the rest of these intake settings in just a couple minutes. For the next couple sections here, the adoption sites and the drop-off sites, really the only thing we need to configure here is when these places are going to be open. So set a schedule for when they're going to be open. So let's say I know that the Collin Creek Mall, which is one of my adoption sites, we're going to open adoptions there on a certain date. So I can click this edit pencil here to the right, and I can say, all right, so my schedule for the Collin Creek Mall for adoptions is going to start on November 1st and run through September 10th. So those are the dates that it's going to be open. And now I want to set the times that it's going to be available. And this will show up later where donors are searching for information on where they can go to adopt angels. This is kind of the information that will be shown to them. So starting on 11/1 through 12/10, we're going to be there every Monday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Same for Tuesday, same for Wednesday. I made a mistake there, but that's okay because I'll show you how to fix it, because that's a question we get sometimes. So during the week, we're open during this times, and then maybe on the weekends, we are open a little earlier, stay open a little later, okay? So that is me setting the open schedule for the adoption site of the Collin Creek Mall. If I made a mistake and I want to change this, I want to come back and change this, I can click change my segment here to closed and say, actually, I'm going to close it for that 15-minute slot right there. And actually on Mondays, we're only there till 2 p.m. So I'm going to close those. So you just use this toggle, this open close, to set the schedule as open or closed. And obviously the green cells are the ones that are open. Okay, so what we're doing, and you can kind of see it down here towards the bottom, what we're doing is building a schedule. So for those dates, this is the open and schedule time for this adoption site. Okay, if you're not doing in-person adoptions, if you don't have mall trees, if you don't do that whole thing, that's fine. You can skip right over this section. It's not required. But if you do have those in-person sites and you want to be able to give your donors a pointer towards those open times, this is where you want to do that. So very similarly, in fact, it's the exact same process for your drop-off sites. You can come in here and configure when people can come to drop off gifts, starting on what date, ending on what date, and what dates and times that would be open for your drop-off sites. So the exact same process. Now we get to distribution. This is a very important one. In fact, this is really one of the main two things that have to be done before you can start intake. before you can start intake, you have to have your intake sites configured and you have to have your distribution sites configured. Again, even if you don't have an address for your distribution site, you need to have it, a placeholder for it in the system so that we can configure all of these settings. So what we're doing here is actually building the rules around these distribution sites. These are the places, again, defining distribution site. I'm sure you're all aware, but this is the place where the families are coming to pick up their gifts way far away in December sometime. These are the places where they're going to come to do that, and where we are going to assign them an appointment to be able to come pick up their gifts. So in order to do that, we need to have a couple of different pieces of information. I'm going to go ahead and click this edit pencil. If I didn't say it already, anywhere you are inside of TSAM in this module or any of the TSAM modules, if you're looking to edit something, you're almost always looking for that edit pencil. So if you see that pencil there, that means there's something you can edit. So I'm going to click that and get in here to edit this distribution site. So we need to do a few different things. First off, we need to give it a code, what we call a distribution code. As you guys know, as you start processing applications and start assigning distribution appointments, each family is given a unique code. Well, that code is made up of a few different things. Firstly, it's made up of what we call the distribution code, which identifies which distribution site this family is going to pick their gifts up at. So this particular one, we have a code of DFW. Okay, so any family that receives an appointment to pick up a gift at this distribution site, their code is always going to start with DFW. So that can be between 1 and 3 letter code. You can make those up. They can be whatever you want if you have a system you want to use. But that's what they're going to be used for. So every distribution site has to have a code. You can't start processing applications without that. So that's a critical element. The other thing you need is the family code start and end ranges. So every family receives a unique code. Part of the unique part of that code is actually the family number, that family code number. So what this is telling us is for families who receive an appointment at this distribution site, what number do we want to start numbering them at? A lot of times this is very specific because at your warehouse, you may have rows that are labeled like families 1,000 to 1,999. And then the next row is 2,000 to you have a range that you want these numbers to be in. So this allows you to do that. So this one is set to have a family code starting at 100 and then to 200. So let me try to explain this a little bit better, illustrate what I mean by this. If I am the very first family who applies and receives a distribution appointment at this distribution site, this one happens to be the Christmas Distribution Center. If I'm the first family that receives that application, my unique family code is going to be DFW 100 because we're starting with number 100. The second family that is assigned a distribution appointment here will get DFW 101. DFW 102, and so on and so on and so on. The angels within that family also receive a unique code. So for our first family, your angels would be DFW 100A, and then if there's a second kid, DFW 100B, and so on within that family range. We go all the way through the alphabet. It can even cycle through the alphabet and have double A's and so on if they have a lot of kids. So that's how the family codes and the number ranges work. Those two elements are absolutely critical. You have to have those in there in order to be able to start assigning distribution appointments and processing your applications. There's also what we call a special care range of numbers. So if you're going to be processing special care applications, which we'll talk about later, you would also need to have a code for those. And they follow the same pattern. Another important thing that you can do here, and this is really a tip, if you're a returning user, you may or may not have known about this last year, so I want to make sure that you do know this year. This section right here, there's this, what we call a rich text area. This is where you can append any information that you want to go out with the distribution appointment reminders that go out to your applicants for this distribution site. So once their appointment is scheduled and they receive that automatic notification to say your application's been accepted, here's when your appointment is, you can use this section to append any additional information. So maybe something like, bring your driver's license to get pickup. You cannot bring children, right? So whatever, any kind of rules you have, or if you want to say park in the red lot, so anything like that. So that kind of specific information for your campaign, you can include that here, and that will automatically push out with those distribution appointment reminders. So helpful tip. I'm not sure everybody knows about that, so I want to make sure to point that out as a nice tip for you. Okay, and then the last thing we need to do while we're here, and again, another totally critical element, is to set the schedule for our distribution. So most people are doing distribution sometime in December. So I'm going to use this calendar down here at the bottom to scroll forward to December. So for this distribution site, we're going to do a 2-day all-out distribution starting on, let's say, December 17th, and then we'll go through the 18th. So you can see I chose that week, and so the calendar, if you look up here across the top, the calendar has moved to that week. And now I want to say, all right, we're going to do distribution starting at 9 a.m., and we're going to go through 5 p.m. And we want to take, let's say we want to do it by the hour. I can change my segment time. I could change my segment time to 1 hour and click update. So you can see it's going to change the schedule blocks from 15-minute windows to 1 hour windows. And so now what I want to be able to say is, okay, we are going to see 50 families every hour for distribution starting on, when did we say, December 17th. So I changed my distributions per segment to 50, and we already changed it to an hour. So now I'm just going to start clicking these boxes. So we're going to do 50 families between 9 and 10 a.m., 50 between 10 and 11. Of course, I can, we might break at 12 o'clock to catch up and have a quick lunch. And then we're going to start doing another 50 starting at 1 o'clock. And I can click and drag. I'm just holding and dragging down here to add my 50 per hour. Then maybe on Saturday, we might have extra volunteers and we can do an even bigger distribution push on Saturday. So we're going to see 100 families every hour. So I just changed my distributions per segment, and I'm going to set the same schedule, but with 100 slots every hour. So what we are in fact doing is creating an appointment schedule where now we have, for example, on Friday, December 17th, we have 50 slots between the 9 and 10 a.m. window. So as I start processing my applications and I want to assign appointments, it knows that there are 50 that are open and I can choose those appointments to fill. So this is you as the administrator kind of ahead of time saying, these are how many appointments we're going to need at this distribution site. This is very helpful if you have multiple distribution sites and you only can serve so many families out of one. So let's say your core gym, you can do the first 500 families out of there. So you would only want to set a total of 500 appointments for that distribution site. And you can actually see the current count over here to the left. Right now I have 1,050 appointments. That's what all these add up to. And then, so I can only do my first 500 out of the core gym, but then I have this backup warehouse where I'm going to do an additional 1,000. So over there, I would put 1,000 appointment slots. And then as you start processing these applications, you will assign the first 500 families an appointment at your gym or your gym distribution site. And then you'll start assigning your the rest of them to your backup warehouse. So that, or any combination of those, however you want to manage those. But that's the idea behind setting up the distribution codes and schedules. Okay, so once we have a schedule in place, that's actually what you need in order to be able to start processing applications. The next thing I'm going to move to is the application itself. So this is something that was in place last year, but there's a quick update to it. So if you're returning, you want to pay special attention to this section. But if you look here on the screen, there are 3 different types of applications that this system processes. Number 1, we just call family applicants. So these are the application for regular families, but that is entered manually by your intake staff. We'll talk about that in a second when we talk about our strategies for intake. That's the ones that are entered manually by your staff. Second is the special care applications. Again, we'll talk about those at a later time. But typically, just to give you a really quick overview of those are used to process large batches of angels who don't come from the family structure. So maybe you have a nursing home or a children's home where you're trying to group all of them under one application rather than each one of them having to complete a family application. So that's what special care is used for. And then lastly, and this is the one I'm going to click on, the Angel Tree Public. So this is the online application form. So what I'm going to do by selecting that and clicking next, what I can then do is step through these lists here and say, for my campaign, these are the data fields that I want to collect on my application. So you can see them all listed here. If I have checked the box that says asked, that means the client is going to be asked that question. They're going to be asked their question, what is your ethnicity, right? If I don't want to ask that question, that's too much information. I don't really need it. It's not part of our program. I can uncheck that box. And that means that when someone goes to fill out an application for my location, they won't be presented with that question. If, on the other hand, I do want to ask that question, and not only do I want to ask it, but I want to require it. I want to make sure they can't even submit this application without giving me this very important information. Then I would check the required box. And the application form is smart enough to know that your campaign has required this information and it won't let the applicant pass without giving it to you. So that's really great. That's really helpful. So you can configure each step of the application. The first one is the basic applicant info. The second one is household members. So these are people who live within the household, but who are not qualified as angels. If you want to collect information about them as well, you can do that. If you want to just turn off that whole step, like we don't even care about who else lives in the household, you could just uncheck the top one there. And then that step won't even be presented to them. They won't even be asked about their additional household members. The third one is the budget worksheet. So if you want to get information about their household budget, if that helps in kind of qualification, you can do that. And then lastly, and probably the one that people are most interested in, is the angel section. So these are all the different options that you can present to collect angel information from your families. You don't have to use all of these. In a lot of cases, you won't want to ask things as specific as, underwear size, dress size, but in some cases you might. So if you want to include those, you just check the box to say ask. If you don't want to ask those questions, you just uncheck them. New feature alert. So if you're a returning user, definitely pay attention to this section, is the ability to add what we call a pick list for your gift options, but really you could use it for anything. So let me explain. In years past, we have these need, wish, favorite fields, which are just free form text. So on the application, it just says, what do you wish for? And then they can type in absolutely anything. Sometimes that can cause a situation because they're wishing for things like a new house for my mom, or I hope my kids wish for that, but those kinds of things. And things that are just really unrealistic that you don't want your donors to see. So what we've implemented here is a way for you to kind of narrow down that list and give them something to choose from. So if I want to do that, I will click this button here that says add values. So let's call this our, we'll call this our gift wish list, and you can call it anything you want. So if I had somebody ask me the other day, can we have a place for them to enter their sheet size, because we have a donor who provides bedding, and we want to be able to give them bedding, but we need to know the size sheets they need. Well, you could call this sheet size and make the options be twin, queen, king, that kind of thing, right? So so you can use this in lots of different ways, but mostly you're going to use it as the gift wish list. This is the most common request we get. And so here you can actually insert a list of what kind of allowable gifts. We might allow them to ask for strollers, but it only makes sense if they're from age 0 to, I don't know, maybe really small 5-year-old. It doesn't make sense for them to choose that gift if they're 16 years old, right? Or we might ask for video games, but we only want to allow those for ages 10 and up. Okay, so that would just leave no max age. Or you might have something really generic that is allowable for any age. So you can complete this list. You can add as many of these values as you want. And what's going to happen is when the family goes to apply, when they get to this gift wish list section, it'll be a drop-down list, and it will only show the gifts that are available for their age range. So we'll know the age of the angel at that point. If they happen to be 11, then they would see video games and learning toys. If they happen to be 2, they would see stroller and learning toys. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can come back and edit those at any time if you start to hear a lot of requests for, hey, we really want to be able to request tablets, and you begrudgingly want to add that to the list. You can come back and do that. You can come back here and click edit values and add another one, or remove any that are there that you don't want to offer anymore. So that's a new feature for this year. So you want to make sure you go through and configure your application. Really quickly, because I'm running out of time to get to my intake strategies, which I really want to make sure to go over. And I'll go ahead and give you a heads up. This is probably going to run a little bit long. If you're happy to stick around, please do. If you have other places to be, we totally understand. And the rest of the webinar, well, the whole webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of the day. Just how long it takes this video to render, but so by today, tomorrow, you should be able to see that on our YouTube channel to catch anything that you miss. So just a heads up, if I go over, which I'm known for, it will be available for you. So just going through these last couple of things really quickly, this tab here, documents. So this is very important if you're doing online applications especially. This is where we are telling the system what documents are required from your applicants before they can submit their application. So a lot of time when we say documents, we mean like uploads, like supporting documentation that you need in order to prove their eligibility or their identity or whatever it is you're trying to approve. So you can add, so these are custom, you can add whatever documents you want. I would just click here to say add required document. There may be something you want to add, something along the lines of, your SNAP number, or like something that shows your SNAP number, because that might tell you that they definitely qualify. And then here you would say, who is required to upload those? Do I need one per applicant, or do I need one per angel? So you can choose here which documents are required and from whom, okay? When we go through application processing, we'll show you what this looks like at the next webinar. But this is, in a nutshell, this is the documentation that you are requiring from your applicants before they're able to submit their application. They would have to upload these things. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do right now is switch back over to our intake site and just start talking really quickly about some intake strategies. There are several different ways that you might run your Angel Tree program, and these are very unique to your community, right? To the way that your location has always done things, or maybe you're trying to change things up. There's lots of different ways you might do that. And we have lots of different tools that can support you in whichever strategy you are leaning towards. So the strategies really fall into two camps. One is the more traditional, what I call interview style. This might mean you have people come in person and do actual intake interviews, or this could be phone interviews, right? But either way, there's someone from the Salvation Army, a representative, maybe it's a volunteer, maybe it's yourself, maybe it's some staff, but somebody does an interview with the applicant and takes their information on their behalf and enters it into the system for them. So that's a little bit more of the traditional way where you would do intake where people would come in person, but now I've heard of people doing it on the phone as well. The second strategy camp really falls into what's really new is the online intake. And it's something I think a lot of people use our system because of our robust online intake tools. And it's something that people have tried out last year and like really love and want to. I've heard people say we'll never ever go back ever again back to in-person or interview style, but the system does allow for both. So let me start with interview style. So if you are planning to have some sort of interaction and interview with your applicants, this is you. There are a couple different ways to do it. You could do in person, you might do on the phone, you might want to pre-schedule appointments, or you might be someone who just does, hey, we're taking applications from this day, on this day at this time, come line up outside our building and we'll take the first however many we can get to. So if that's kind of the most basic. So if that's you, where you just say, hey, come on down and apply and we'll be here to take your application. If that's you, you actually don't need to do anything else here. There's nothing else you need to do here. You are actually ready to start taking applications if you are doing it that way. When I say, just really quickly, I'm not going to go through the taking of an application, but if you are doing this interview style where you're entering them manually into the system versus the applicant doing it online, you just do that here under applicants, new applicant, and you start filling out their form as you interview them. Okay, so if that's what you're doing, you're done. There's nothing else you need to configure here. You have everything you need as long as you have that associated distribution site that we talked about. If you're going to take that another step, you want to do interview style, but we want to do it by appointment only, because having people line up outside the doors, not super COVID friendly, and also, very inconvenient for our clients and not very dignified, them standing in a line. So I want to maybe elevate that a little bit and do it by appointments. We do offer some tools here that will allow you to manage those appointments. So just like we set up distribution appointments, I can also set up a schedule for what we call intake appointments. So I would come here. Again, I'm on the intake side. I'm looking to edit my appointment schedule. So this is all the appointment stuff in this column to the left. So I'm going to click edit my schedule. And here I'm doing the exact same thing that I did for my distribution. I'm going to say, okay, we're going to do 20-minute appointments. So I'm going to set my segment time to 20 minutes. And we can only do, we have maybe 2 caseworkers or intake people. So we're going to do 2 applications per 20 minutes. Okay. And we're going to start those the week of September 6th. So on this day, September 6th, we're doing 2 appointments every 20 minutes during this time. Okay. So I'm setting up a schedule of open appointments. Intake appointments. Okay, easy peasy. And just like over on the distribution appointment, you can add some additional information here, something along the lines of bring your documents and not your kids, something like that. So that information, when they get notified of their appointment time, again, that information will be presented in that email with it. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to close it. So now I have a schedule. I can always go back and add more open appointments, right? You probably do intake over several weeks, and you can always go back and add more slots or remove slots if you don't have the staff, that kind of thing. But now I have an appointment schedule. So now the question is, how do I get people assigned to the appointment schedule? There's two different ways to do that. One way is to actually allow people to request appointments online. So what you would do if you have a core website or a community website where people know to go to find information about Angel Tree, you can post a link to here. This is a place where they can come and request an appointment. Now, if I want to do that, the thing I have to have pre-configured is my serviceable, what we call serviceable zip codes. So these are the zip codes in my service area that we will be able to take appointments from. So if I don't have any zip codes, the person's going to get here, they're going to put in a zip code and it's going to say, we can't serve you right now. You have to have pre-configured your serviceable zip codes. To do that, back here on my intake site tab, I'm going to click the pencil next to the zip codes, and I'll be able to add my zip codes down here at the bottom. So these are the serviceable zip codes for this location. If you have multiple intake sites and you want to make sure that people from zip code 12345 go to the Smithville core, and people with zip codes 56789 go to the Jonesville core, you configure each of those intake sites with their appropriate zip codes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take one of these zip codes, 75001. So if I'm doing online appointment requests, you can allow them to come here. They would put in a zip code. If their zip code's not found, it'll just tell them, unfortunately, this zip code's not served. But if they hit a good one, if they put their zip code in and, oh, yeah, whoops, 1 second. The other very critical thing that you need to do, besides adding in your zip codes, right back here where we were, is you actually need to say online appointment requests and set them to open. So if you're accepting requests, but not until a certain date, on that date, that's when you want to come here and check this box to say open. And that's going to allow people to start requesting appointments. And I want to say we're actually only going to take up to 500 appointments. And the system will know to cap it. If there are already 500 appointments for this location, it just won't let anybody else through. And then if you want to go update that later, you can. Okay, so back to our appointment request. I'm going to start over, put my zip code 75001. I'm going to click submit. And now, because we have opened the appointment request portal, now I can request an appointment. So I'm going to put my name. I'm going to confirm my email and put my phone number. So this is not an application. This is just them telling you that that they want an appointment. So I'm going to leave here for a second. I'm going to go here under appointments, intake requests. Uh-oh, I don't think it went through. Oh, because I clicked cancel. Oops. Okay, so now that was a success. So now if I come back over here, now we see that this appointment has been requested. So if you're using this model where you want to allow people to request appointments online, what you would then do is have somebody back at your office who is sitting here on this screen. And again, I was under appointments, intake requests, who now is in charge of talking with this person. Maybe it's doing a pre-interview, maybe they call them, maybe I don't know, whatever your pre-screening kind of questions are, and a lot of places will do a pre-screening. This is how you would do it. So I come here and I say, okay, this person has requested an appointment. You can see the date and time they requested it. So you can work these in the order that they were requested. You can order them and filter You can always use the filters to filter by the dates that were requested. So let's see all the requests we got from this date to this date, that kind of thing. But ultimately, you'd call them back. You would, pre-screen, do whatever it is you're going to do, and you say, okay, we're going to go ahead and give you an appointment. If I called them up and I said, actually, no, I don't need an appointment, I can just change that to canceled. So we could cancel this one. But if I want to schedule it, I'm going to click this calendar icon over here to the right. And what this is going to do is bring me to a screen that shows me the appointments that we set up for intake for this location. Okay, so here are all of those open slots that we previously set up in the campaign configuration. So you as the admin, you set the schedule, and then you can have anybody on your staff who is tasked with doing the appointment setup. They come here and all they're doing is assigning appointments into slots that you already had opened. Right, so I'm going to say, okay, I want to assign them to this first slot here. I might have even asked them a question about where they heard about us and what their preferred language is, so that way when their intake appointment happens, you can maybe have somebody standing by who speaks Spanish, kind of thing. And so now that appointment, if I go here under appointments, now that appointment's no longer requested, it's actually scheduled. So this is a scheduled appointment for this person, okay? So strategy number one, well, actually we're on number two. Strategy number two is doing scheduled intake appointments. You can utilize that request an intake appointment feature, or another situation that I've seen, or a strategy, is you have one phone number, maybe a phone bank, where people call in and request an appointment, and you do your pre-scheduling or your pre-screening there. So if that's the case, you can kind of skip the whole appointment request thing that we just did and go straight to scheduling the appointment. So here under intake appointments, that's the screen that I'm on. I would click new applicant intake appointment. I say, okay, the person I'm talking to on the phone wants an appointment. Do we have one on Wednesday? Yeah, sure. How about Wednesday at 10:40? And then I would just complete their information here. So again, this is you or your staff or your phone bank monitors entering this appointment directly. So every time I schedule an intake appointment, it confirms it here, and it also sends an email notification out to that applicant to say an appointment has been scheduled. Here's the date and time. Here's the address. This is where you need to go. And any of that specific information you included, like bring your documentation, park around the back, that kind of thing. That all goes to them when the appointment is scheduled. And then it also goes to them again 24 hours before the scheduled appointment time. So they're getting a reminder that they need to come in for their appointment at that date and time. So if I'm sitting at the phone bank and I have people calling in requesting appointments, I would just stay on this screen and I just keep scheduling people. Schedule another, schedule another, schedule another. But I'm going to cancel this and I'm going to click here, return to appointments. So now I have my list of upcoming appointments. So if that's a strategy you're going for pre-scheduling appointments, whether those are in person or on the phone, however you're going to do that, on the day of appointments, you can use the filter to say, okay, show me all the appointments we have coming up today, and you can order them by their date and time. And so now you have like a sign-in list for your appointments, and you can process those as the people come through. So if you're doing in person, so let's recap, in person or on the phone, what I call interview style. The important things that you need to have configured are, if you're just doing straight in person with no appointments, there's nothing else you need to do. If you are using appointments and you want to allow appointment requests online, you need to have scheduled your serviceable zip codes. You obviously need to have an intake schedule, and you need to come here and say this is open whenever you're ready to start receiving those appointment requests. All right, so that is, and then of course, when the people come in for their appointment. We're just going here under applicants, we're clicking new applicant, and we're starting to process. We're interviewing this person, and we are actually going through the application process. That's not part of what we're covering today, but if all of the things that I've showed you are pre-configured, you'll be ready to go and start entering your applicants. Okay, so that was strategy. Kind of camp number one is the interview style. And if you're using appointments, there are some extra configurations you want to do. Now, the other kind of camp falls under online, and this is very popular. This is becoming more and more used. So if it's something you want to try out, this is something you'll want to know. So online applications means that the applicant goes online from their own home, wherever they are, from whatever device they're on. It just has to be web enabled, right? So it's mobile devices, and that's the majority of what we see people use. Mobile devices, PCs, tablets, anything that's web enabled. They can log on from wherever they are and complete their application completely remotely away from the building. You don't have to have them come in at any point if you don't want them to. So this is like a full online intake. If you're wanting to do that, there are a couple more settings that we need to have configured. So I'm going to click here again. We're back on the intake site. Oops. We're back on the intake site. I'm going to click edit. And this section here, online applications, this is what we need to configure now. So when I'm ready to actually start taking online applications, I would click open. I wouldn't want to do that before I'm actually ready to start receiving them. So if there's you're going to start taking applications on September 1st, and that's what you've announced. On September 1st is when you want to come here and click open. Until then, you can just leave it closed, but go ahead and pre-configure everything else. I'm going to go ahead and set it to open. You will put in here a max number. This is the max number of applications the system will allow without an invitation code. And I'll talk about invitation codes in just a second. So the system is smart enough to know, this is the max number of applications that we're accepting. So if I'm the 999th person to come in here and I apply, I'm going to get through. If I'm the 1000th person to come in here and apply, I'm going to get through. But if I'm the 1001st, it's going to give me a message to say, unfortunately, it's closed. So if that happens and you decide you want to come back and change your max number, you want to go ahead and open it back up to public applications, you can come here and change this number at any time. So you might want to, we're going to allow another extra 100 people kind of thing. You can come here and update that at any time. So this is really what we call kind of public applications. You've just kind of opened the floodgate and said, anybody out there who has a zip code within my serviceable zip codes, right, which we've already configured down here at the bottom, anybody out there who can get to this website, who has an address in one of my zip codes, they can just come on through. That's open online public applications. Another way to do that is to use invitation codes. So invitation codes allow you to still do online intake in the sense that it's distanced, right? They don't have to come into the office, but it allows you to more strictly control who is allowed to apply. So in a lot of situations, you might work with community partners like a school, other agencies who refer people to you. And instead of just saying, hey, we're opening online applications and the first 1,000 to get through are just the lucky ones. No, we want to maybe reserve 100 spots for this elementary school and another 100 spots for this agency to give out. That is a great use for invitation codes. So you can choose here to require invitation codes, meaning the only people who are going to get through at all are people with invitation codes. There's no such thing as public open applications. Or you might do a hybrid of the two where invitation codes are not required, meaning people can still get through on the public side. They can just come through as long as they have the zip code. But I'm also going to use invitation codes to ensure that these particular segment of applicants get through. A great use case for this is you have online open applications, but you want to make sure that all of your core families get through. All the families that attend your core have a spot. So I would give them invitation codes. So that means no matter what's happening with the public online applications, you have this special unique code that will get you through no matter what. So the setting here is asking me, do we want to require invitation codes? Required means you're only getting through if you have an invitation code. Not requiring it doesn't mean you still can't use invitation codes. It just means it's not required, so the public can also get through using just their zip code, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and I'm really quickly, this is really the last thing we wanna talk about, is jump over to the invitation codes page. So here under admin, I go to invitation codes, and this is where we actually generate and manage those invitation codes if you want to use them. This can be a really powerful tool and kind of help you with your transition from doing a more structured in-person interview style and making the leap over to online intake. Because really what this does is restricts the or controls that floodgate of online applications. So I can come here and I can click to generate codes, and I have two options. If you guys are returning users and you haven't used invitation codes before, or you have used them but maybe had some ideas about how they could be better, this is a new feature that I'm about to show. So make sure you pay attention to this one. So I can choose to do individual codes. And so I'm just going to say I just want to create 80 individual codes for the Denton core, because I'm going to give these out to my my families, right? Something along those lines. So you'll see what happens is it actually creates 80 individual invitation codes, and you can hand these out to people to use as their pass, right? This is their pass into the online application. So you can hand that to them and they can use those individual codes. Each code can only be used one time use only. And once that code is used, this report page here will actually list who used it and will give you a link to their application. Okay, so that's individual codes. That's not necessarily new functionality. We had that last year. What's new is the group codes. So this is a situation where you have like those community partners that I talked about. You may be able to say, okay, I'm going to generate 100 codes for this elementary school, and the guidance counselor gives that code out to any families who they think could benefit from the program. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to add my group name. That's really, the group name really is just to help me track who I gave this group code to. You will be able to create multiple group codes for the same group name. So if, for example, I want to create 2 different group codes for Pink Elementary, one that the counselor is going to give out to 5th graders and one that she's going to give out to 4th grader families, I can do that. But really, it's creating that group code. The name just helps me remember who I gave it to. So in this case, I'm going to do let's say 20, and these codes will drive intake to the Irving core. So Pink Elementary works with the Irving core, and anybody who applies with that code is going to be designated as an Irving core applicant. So I'm going to go ahead and generate those. All right, and you see they show up down here below. You see they all say Pink Elementary. I can use my filter. If I want to come back here, I can always use my filter to search by the group name and say, hey, show me all those codes for Pink Elementary. So it gave me a list of my 20. I can export this to Excel, give that to the guidance counselor and say, okay, here you go, here's your codes. So she can actually, that guidance counselor might use these 2 different ways. They might say, I'm going to take this group code. You see how they're all the same group code, GL3E96A2B. That's the same group code. She can hand out that one group code to all the families, and the first 20 that use it are going to get through. Okay, so it's easier for her to manage, just, hey, here's my group code, just go use it, and then once it's done, it's done. So she could do it that way, or they might say, here, I'm going to give out the individual codes to the 20 families that I know need them, and they will be linked back to this Pink Elementary. So they'll take up one of the 20 spots. So really depending on what group you're working with and how they want to handle it, you may give out the actual group code, which can be used 20 times, or you can give out the individual invitation codes that are part of that group, and each of those codes is used once. If I want to come back and say, okay, I gave 20 codes to Pink Elementary, but they're telling me that they have a lot of more families that need to apply, so I need to increase that number. If I want to create a separate group code for some reason, generate a new group code, I can generate a new group code that I give also to Pink Elementary, and it'll have a different group code. Or if I wanted to use the same group code that she's already given out, I can come here and I can click on Pink Elementary, and I can just change the number of codes allocated. Let's go up to 30. I'll update that, and then what that actually does is create 10 more slots in that with that same group code. So now 30 people can use that code. So hopefully that makes sense. As those codes start to get used and applications start to be created using those codes, again, you'll see them listed here. So you would be able to turn around and pull back out a report that says, okay, these are the codes that we gave and these are the people that used them. So that's really helpful. So that is the strategy of online intake using invitation codes. And remember that you can use invitation codes solely, meaning they have to have an invitation code, or you can say, well, the invitation code's not required, but I'm still going to generate codes to make sure that the people I want to get through can get through. So inside the online camp of intake strategy, you kind of have those few different options to be able to choose how you want to let people through. Is it just an open online floodgate where the first 1,000 can get through? Or do I want to limit it to only the people who have invitation codes? Or do I want to do a combination of both? And so those are the settings that we talked about here on the intake site. So with that, I definitely went over like I normally do, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the different strategies for intake that you can work with. And then once you've chosen which way you're going to do intake this year, how you can configure the system to support you in that, whether you want to use appointments, whether you don't want to use appointments, whether you want to do online applications, whether you want to use invitation codes. You can really customize that to however to match your strategy, right? To match your intake strategy. So that really covers everything I wanted to show you today. There were some new features in there, so I hope the returning users got something valuable out of that as well. If you have some time, or you're a new user especially, and you need some kind of additional training up on how to configure your campaign, I went through it pretty quickly. So if you want to check out our YouTube channel, it has some videos that go over campaign setup in a lot of detail. So make sure to take a look at that if you need that. If you need to contact us for any reason, whether you need support in getting your campaign set up, information about pricing, some additional support in your campaign setup, or questions or issues that you're running into, we're always happy to take a look at those with you. You can email us directly, no matter which territory you're in. You can email us directly for the purposes of Angel Tree support. You can email us directly at tsamsupport@dataparadigm.com. The email address is shown there. And then, of course, feel free to check around our other resources that are available. It's a library of FAQs, and then our YouTube channel that has a lot of different videos to get trained up on anything. And then make sure to join us back in a couple of weeks on the 26th, when we'll be talking about processing intake applications and all of the fun surrounding that. So make sure to join us back. If you had questions that you asked and I wasn't able to get to them, Eduardo has been answering those on the side for us, which I really appreciate. But if we weren't able to get to your question, we'll definitely follow up with you. And we hope to see a lot of you again in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much for joining.